Should Christians be going to that wedding? Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up, friends? My name is Eric. The goal of this channel is to bring biblical clarity to a controversial world. And so today, we're going to talk about Christians attending weddings. Okay, I'm going to leave some ambiguity in that. You'll see where we're going with this pretty quickly. So I guess I want to start by just acknowledging maybe you've been asked to attend a wedding and you feel uncomfortable going because you feel like it violates your biblical view of marriage, or as a child of God, it just brings you conflict. Maybe you've been invited and you've either went and feel regret, you've went and feel empowered, or maybe you're just questioning like, man, what if I ever was invited to a wedding that I didn't feel comfortable going to because it violated my biblical view of marriage? And so I want to start by just posing a couple illustrations. Okay, so if I were me, I'm speaking for myself. If I were invited to a wedding by someone who I knew, they were in a marriage to, two faithful Christians, they were in marriage together, and one of them committed adultery, against the other person, and then went to remarry, and they kind of never settled this sin, and were living in the sin of this adultery, and they invited me to their next wedding with their adulterer, I would say no. You know why? Because I would view that as a sinful way to express your marital covenant, and I would not attend out of my own conscience because I would not be in agreement and support of the adultery that took place, and it just would not feel like something I'd want to go to. What about a different one? What if this is outside of marriage, but what if someone invited me to their abortion procedure and said, hey, I just, I want you to be there. I want you to acknowledge it. I want you to participate in kind of supporting me in this. No, like I'm not going to go and be a part of that. And so why would I not attend the marriage of an adulterer or the procedure of an abortion? Because in my view, those are sinful practices. And so for me to go, it's showing to that person that I not only support you, but I affirm what you're doing here. And so, like I said in the beginning, a little bit of a teaser, I think you probably know where we're going to land this plane today. If someone asked me to go to their wedding and it was a same-sex couple, or if it was someone who was having an identity crisis, not acknowledging how God created them and made them, and wanted me to come, I guess that's the question today. Should Christians be attending these types of weddings? So I would say most genuine Christians, like faithful, Bible-believing, Spirit-filled Christians, and the first two examples I said about, the active adulterer or the abortion procedure, you'd be like, no, I wouldn't go to that. That seems totally rational that you wouldn't go to that because I don't want to celebrate that sin. It feels off to me. It feels wrong. But what has happened is I feel like culture and even some really progressive Christianity has started to bait us into this conflict now of like, well, what if it's a same-sex marriage? Or what if it's someone that has transitioned out of their gender and wants to marry someone of the same gender or a different gender, whatever? Like, it's almost baiting Christians into like, well, the loving thing to do is to go. And what does it hurt if you just go and show your support and, you can model Jesus in this? I think those are ways in which this has become messy, and it's become a contentious subject for many people. And so what I will say is if you don't see biblical marriage in the way that God defined it, and I'm going to tell you what that is today if you don't know, but if you don't agree in the biblical definition of marriage, you will not agree with this. And I hope you keep watching, but you're not going to agree with this. If you think this is all up for debate and what God said is not really clear, it's not for today, when God was very clear in the garden where Jesus reemphasized it, on what marriage is, who it's for, how it's blessed, the ordination of marriage. If you don't agree with the biblical principles of marriage, you're going to struggle to agree with me on anything else here. So here's what I will say. If marriage is defined by God, which it is, then that means we get to actually listen and hear and live out what he said. And so there is a holy way, there is a righteous way, and there is a sinful way to interpret God's word. And I would say throughout history, especially biblical history, we see there are strong remnants of people who say, you know what? I cannot celebrate someone else's sin. I cannot be a part of your sinful act. And so in Daniel chapter 3, man, I think this is an awesome way to look at this kind of in a different context. So in Daniel chapter 3, King Nebuchadnezzar, he's king of the Babylonians, and they are a godless, ruthless, violent culture, right? And so there's this edict that goes out to all the people. You can't pray to your God. You can't acknowledge your God, because Nebuchadnezzar basically says, I'm your God. And so he creates this golden image of himself and basically makes a declaration. When you hear the sound play, you must bow and show holy respect for this idol I've created of myself. Well, you have these three Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they make this bold, declarative decision that for us, we cannot participate in your sinful act. And so if you want to sin, that's on you. But by us bowing down, even if we're faking it, even if we're just doing it to not get killed, it is showing that we are in approval, that we are in acceptance, that we agree with this. So they make a decision, hey, we're not bowing down. The rest of you can, we won't. And if you know the story, they get thrown into a fiery furnace that turned all the way up. And Jesus intervenes, gets into the furnace with them. They come out and not a single fabric of their clothing is burned. And this is a revelation to the people that the God of Israel is the one true God. And but we see three young boys make a bold decision that is sinful. And because it's sinful, we cannot participate in this. So I would say there are bold illustrations biblically of Christians saying we cannot celebrate sin. What God has called unholy, we cannot applaud it and affirm it just to make you feel good. Because in my conscience, in their conscience, man, it feels wrong when we celebrate sin. So let's talk about what is marriage defined by God? Like, how did he define it? What can we actually take from his definition and apply? So first, marriage was created and defined by God. Yes, states and countries and governments, they have taken the concept of marriage. They've written laws around it and regulations and tax benefits, all that stuff. But you need to understand something. Marriage was not created by your state. It was created by God. And so that makes it a pre-political institution. Before politics ever got introduced and there was ever infighting over it, God is the one who created marriage. And we see this in Genesis chapter 2. We see this in the garden after he creates Adam. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, here is God's definition of marriage. He says, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh, okay? God was very specific in using gender roles. Now, again, some get super offended by the clarity of definition that God gives, but I'm speaking to Christians. If you're a faithful Bible-believing Christian, you cannot run away from this and reinterpret this to mean whatever you want and change genders and change, you just can't. Like, God was clear in what biblical marriage was defined at. One man, one woman, one flesh for one lifetime. That's God's definition. And so what do we do with that? When there is a marriage that is different than this, that is outside of this definition, how do we view that marriage? A man and a woman, this is an interesting just takeaway from this, a man and a woman make up the only pair of people described in Scripture that are able to create a one flesh union. It is the only way God instituted two becoming one was through a man and a woman in marriage. And so God's view of marriage is significant, and it was clear and it was specific. Now, Jesus even goes on to quote this definition of a man-woman marriage, and he does this in Matthew chapter 19, and he even adds to it a bit. Here's what he says. He says, "Haven't you read," he replied, "that at the beginning, the Creator, God, made them male and female?" It's like he's getting ahead of some of the 21st century objections that we would have to gender and to marriage. So he says, "Haven't you read," he replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, 'For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh.' So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." Okay, so this is the only time we see in all of creation where God makes two into one. And it's an incredible illustration of what happens when we are saved. When we come from our dead, lifeless body, we are saved by grace through faith, and we become one with God. We become, he lives in us and he dwells in us. And what a beautiful picture. But in human terms, this is the only time two become one. And there's never another illustration. There's never another couple that the Bible chooses to use in 66 books in tens of thousands of words. They could have given us one other example of a different type of marriage or a different ordination of marriage, but it doesn't. And so we can either run from that or we can accept that and we can wrestle with it. So marriage defined by God is one man, one woman, one lifetime, one flesh. That's what God said. So now we kind of get back to this question, but what if I'm invited to a wedding ceremony and it's anything other than that? And like, what do I do? So we got to understand a few things about what does our attendance at a wedding ceremony signify? Because I know some people are going to say, dude, it's no big deal. Just go, support, be present, love them well. But I think there's an alternative way to look at this that I think, is where some of this conflict comes in. And so if Jesus truly believes, and he does, that marriage is a God-ordained institution, something that was created by God, made by God, then a same-sex couple or any other variation of gender couple, they're not actually getting married in their ceremony. Now, I know that may be hard to hear, but we're talking about from what God created and how God views it. That is not a legitimate marriage to God. And so the state may recognize that, and the state may give you some of the legal benefits of a civil union. That's kind of how I would look at this. It's a civil union recognized by your state, but this is not a marriage that God even recognizes. And so what a wedding signifies is the covenant between two people for one lifetime before God. And so if God can't even recognize this as a wedding, as a marriage, then it should challenge our thinking about why we're going to this wedding ceremony if God doesn't even recognize this in the first place. And so the reason that they can't make a covenant before God is because God laid out the rules and the requirements of marriage. It was not me. You can get angry at me. You can get angry at other people who teach the Bible. This was not our idea. This is what God instituted for our good. And so if a same-sex couple or some other variation is coming together in a wedding ceremony, what they are doing is they are basically engaging into a legally binding contract. They are not entering into a covenant of marriage. This is the same as any other legal contract. And so what this will do is it will provide benefits for them in the same way of same-sex couples legally in their land and wherever they live. But legal rights are not what marriage is about. God defines marriage, not the state, okay? And so we'll move on to another opposition to this, or another way to think about this. What am I doing when I choose to attend a wedding? Now, I'm talking about any wedding under the sun, right? So let's even use a heterosexual wedding for a moment. What am I doing when I attend that wedding? Because a wedding is a very specific type of event. it is unlike other events, right? It's not like you're going over to someone's football party. It's not going to a baptism. It's not going to a church service, right? A wedding is a very specific type of event. It is a celebration of what is going to happen at the altar, right? That is why people attend weddings. The reason you don't go to strangers' weddings on random weekends is because you don't know them. You don't support them. You're not in their life. And so weddings are significant because we're family, we're friends, we're coworkers. We know the people in some way. So when we go to a wedding, it is not a passive decision. It is something that we are choosing to go to out of support. And so in our support, a wedding is structured in a way that there's participation from the people who are attending. And you may not even have noticed this when you go to a ceremony, you go to different people's weddings, but there are different parts of it that are requiring your affirmation. And so some of those things are, you may bring a gift. You may sign a wedding registry. You might dance at the reception. You might clap when the officiant announces the new couple. You may throw rice at them. You may clink your glass at the reception for them to kiss, right? All of those are signs that I support and affirm this marriage. And so, for us as Christians, when we attend a wedding, it is not a passive thing that we are doing. We are making a declarative decision that I support this, okay? Not so much the person, right? You can love the person separately, but when I choose to go to a wedding, there is a bigger thing that we're signifying. And so a Christian, in my view, okay, again, this is my view. I do believe it has biblical standing. The big question today is, should a Christian attend a wedding outside of a man and a woman? And I would say, no, I don't think that we should. And I think there's another way to stay in great relationship and to love them far past a couple hour ceremony. And I think the reason that we shouldn't is not because, we want to be unloving or we want to beat them over the head with the Bible. I think as Christians, we see what God created. We see what he ordained. We see what he calls good. And for us to stand in approval and acceptance of something that we know God did not define as good, I think if you apply that to other places of your life, like, man, you're not going to stand for, sin in other places of your life. You're not going to go to the adulterer's wedding. You're not going to go to the abortion procedure because those are sinful things. And you would acknowledge and agree, like, man, I can support you, but not in this way. And so I would say, I think it is within Christian liberty. Now, again, if you have a strong conscience, like, man, I have to go, it's my son, it's my daughter, I will lose relationship with them for the rest of your life, I would tell you, man, be prayerful, be sensitive to the Lord. But as a general rule, I would say Christians should probably skip the ceremony because of what it is declaring. And here's even some more of what it's declaring. When two people that are committing to a life of sexual sin. You need to understand that. So God defined marriage and sexual relationship as a man and a woman. So anything outside of that is sexual sin. And so for me to affirm your lifetime decision that you are going to step into sexual sin for a lifetime, I think that should cause some pause in us. And as much as culture wants to bait us into that's unloving and that's unfair, I think we don't apply that rule to other places in our life. And so every one of these different scenarios, I think it affirms and it celebrates the union that God does not celebrate or affirm or recognize. So maybe a better way to think about this, if you are a Christian and you say, you know what, in my conscience, I cannot attend this wedding. I can't support it. I can't affirm it. I feel like I'm cheering on your sin, your life sin decision. A certain author, and I forget his name, but he writes it this way. He writes about this thing called the authentic dilemma. And I think this is a great way to interact because maybe you've been invited or you will be invited. And in your conscience, you're like, I can't go, but I don't know how to say no. Like, I don't want to lose them in my life. I don't want them to cut me off, but like, I just can't go, right? So there's this thing called the authentic dilemma, and it's made up of 3 different questions. And so the first question is, ask the couple that has invited you, ask them if they believe it's important for a person to live a genuine, authentic life and to live to their belief and values. So you ask this question: do you think that it's a good thing that anyone lives a genuine and authentic life and lives to their beliefs? And I would say the majority of people are going to answer that, well, yes. And in fact, the counter argument to why that wedding may be taking place in the first place is I'm just living to my authentic, genuine, real self, right? This is just how I am. This is how I was made. And so you're going to ask that question, and they're going to say, yeah, you should live to your authentic, genuine self. Secondly, you ask them, what do you call a Christian who lives an inconsistent life to the beliefs that they say? Basically, someone who preaches one thing and practices something else. What do you call that person? Maybe you figured it out. You call them a hypocrite, someone who says one thing and does another. Then thirdly, you ask them, would you ask me to be a hypocrite or to be genuine and authentic? Okay, now this is what is called the authentic dilemma, because it paints your position very differently. You are not trying to attack them. You are not trying to destroy their life. You are in a dilemma because for you, it would be sin to go and affirm and applaud and celebrate something that you know is sinful. And in the same way in Daniel chapter 3, they said, we cannot bow down to that idol because it's sinful. There is one God worthy of our praise. And so it's the dilemma. And so I think as you kind of ask these questions and hopefully they understand your heart a little bit more, a Christian would not choose to be a hypocrite on purpose. Let me say that differently. Actually, many do. A Christian would not want to honor God and choose hypocrisy. And so it would be hypocritical for a Christian to view God's ordination of marriage in the light of the scriptures and then go willingly to celebrate and to support a marriage that doesn't line up with what God said. And so a way that you can maintain relationship if you need to say no to attending a wedding, I think there's a great way to continue relationship, because I don't think by any means that if we have people in our life that are dealing with any sin issue, right? Whether it's sexual sin or identity sin or drunkenness or envy or, just list the sin. And I don't think the plan for us is to like cut these people out of our life because we were once this sinner and we still sin. So how do you maintain relationship with someone after you've declined to go to their wedding? I think a great example of this is clearly stating why you can't attend. You're being authentic. You're being genuine. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I love you. And then asking them, so when do you get back from your honeymoon? Or if you're not going on your honeymoon, hey, a couple weeks after your wedding, what does your schedule look like? And then planning to have them over for dinner or go out to dinner within a couple weeks of their wedding. Ask them in the declining of the ceremony, saying, because what this is communicating to them is, I love you. I want to be in your life. I want to have a voice in your life. This is not a kind of an end of relationship, but I want to schedule something with you, and I want to be there for you when you need me. I want to support you, not in your sin, but in your journey towards Christ. Like, I want to be a part of your life. And again, they may still have no grace for you not attending the wedding. And I would say that's their choice, not yours. This is a 2-hour event in this lifespan of someone's life. And if they can't understand your honest obligation, but you're also wanting to stay a part of their life, then I would say, man, God just have peace on all of those people. So this is a contentious issue. There's a lot of conflict around this. I know that there are Bible teachers use that pseudo Bible teachers that have disagreements on this. Should we not? I would say it's Christian liberty at the end. If you choose to go as a faithful Christian, like, you're not losing your salvation, right? I think there's some things we need to think about. It's not just saying yes and going, and love is love, and we just support people in sin. I think there's more bigger questions we can ask, but I'd be interested to hear from you. I'm sure this is going to light up the comments. Interested to hear your thoughts on this, but my hope is, as we continue to find biblical clarity in controversial issues, that God would make this clear to us. So I thank you for watching today. I hope you'll join us back next week.